stand-up, it's all about getting the laughs, and it doesn't matter how you get them. There are a lot of kind of ways to skin the cat. So if you're doing a great set and you're really comfortable about the stories that you're telling and they're fantastic, but absolutely nobody's laughing, even if you think you're great, you're basically failing. So it's a very different set of rules. But the rules that you learn in this dojo, in this workspace, can be applied beautifully in your workspace. Okay. There are also a couple of universal truths about stand-up comedy. Number one is, for whatever reason, we find public speaking scarier than death. Most people will put death as their number 2 fear. Not the number 1, really? Okay, so maybe, skydiving for me would be number 1, and then death would be number 2, and then, somewhere down here would be maybe stand-up or something like this. But for most people out there, public speaking is actually more terrifying than death itself. So it's called glossophobia. There's a real word. It's a nice long word. And when you're ranking intensity levels of what's the scariest place to do, then stand-up is the glossophobe's worst nightmare. It's like public speaking on steroids. So it's somehow linked to our feelings of rejection and being cast out of the tribe. And I can assure you that first night that I spent bombing on stage, I felt like the guy was going to pick me up with it and just throw me out on the street. It just felt really bad. But it has this kind of feeling in it that is similar to dying, right? The other rule, and this is a funny one because it's linked to rule A, which is failure is not just part of the learning process, it's an essential part of how you improve as a comic. So you're going to fail. In fact, the rules around the classes that you take are set up in such a way to ensure that you will fail. So they bring in hecklers, they bring in people who will mess you up, they will bring in people who will throw things at you just to try to get you to fail because you want to be failing as soon as possible. And the faster you can fail, the better. Your jokes, you think they're hilarious at home, but then you tell them and it's like crickets. Okay. Failure is how we improve what we do, not just as speakers, but as in all aspects of life. The faster that you can be okay with failure, then the better. Okay, and then the other truth, when you watch, how many people like to watch stand-up comedy? Just in general. Okay, people are, oh, she even made a noise. Like, ooh, yes, I like it so much. Okay, good. So we love watching it. We're exposed to a lot of it. And it looks so easy. How many people have gone to an open mic and said, like, I can do that. I'm as funny as that person, right? Yeah, right? Yeah, sure. So you think it looks so easy. They just get up there and they start talking. It's not easy. It takes huge preparation. You have to write the script. You have to brainstorm. You're throwing out jokes. It takes, for that 8 minutes, it's about 80 hours worth of work. You can basically extrapolate every minute of stand-up comedy is about 10 hours of work. You're writing, you're throwing it away, you're memorizing it, because you have to know what's coming next. You have to prepare for it. And if you draw a blank, it's a terrible, terrible thing. You also have to test it on your friends, test it in a room, test it on the cat, test it in front of a mirror, listen to it over and over and over again. So it looks effortless. I went to see Trevor Noah a couple of months ago, and the guy, he was just 2 hours long, just easiest thing in the world. He was so natural. He just got up on stage, he started walking around, and he'd think a little bit, and oh yeah, that thing would come to him, and he just went with it. It was incredible to watch. But I know that he didn't just get up there and start talking, that every single one of his word for word was crafted and practiced. He's a very hard-working guy. Okay. A joke has an algorithm. It's got kind of a formula. There are things that work. So what is a joke? How does it work? You have your writing, the quality of the actual joke. Then you have the structure of the joke, how the joke is put together, which means memorization is important, because if you forget a word, the joke doesn't land. And then your ability to tell a story. and then your delivery. So all of these things add up together, divided by the energy of the room. And that's an important metric, because you can tell the best joke, have the best technique, be effortless in your presentation, but then nobody's home. You know, you come to a room and everybody's just on their phones or something like that. You are a bit of a victim to, you know, what's happening out there. And then of course, this is all multiplied by your preparation. Do you know backwards and forwards? Have you memorized every single word? Because the more prepared you are, the less likely you are to bomb. There was structure in the joke. So what is that structure? What is a joke? Because if you try to unpack a joke, it's instantly not funny. But it does follow a kind of systematic setup. You want to end with the punch. So the very last word in a sentence of your joke has to be the funniest word. So if you're saying, well, nobody was listening except the cat, and you identify cat as your funniest word, then that has to go at the end. You could say the same joke by saying, well, the cat wasn't listening and neither was anybody else. That's not as funny as saying, no one was listening except the cat. You see that difference there, okay? So the funniest word is at the end. Your intro is as short as possible in order to set the stage. You don't want to waste any words because you only have those 8 minutes. Absolutely the minimum number of words that you need to set up a joke. You build it up, you tell your story, end with that final funny punch. Okay. Just a few tips and tricks for you to go home with. So a good way to start, you always see this sometimes when you see stand-up comics, they tend to engage the crowd. It's a trick if you've lost your way, right? It's a cover-up technique for if you've lost what you're supposed to say next. It gives you time. And I've used this many times because I'm old now. And we don't always remember everything. So, I know you. But if you need a moment to collect your thoughts and you think, oh God, I have no idea what I'm supposed to say, that's your moment to jump in and look at the crowd. Because by the time you finish asking people the question, then it's come back to you. The other nice thing about working the crowd, you form a connection, you form that kind of personal connection, but it also links the person to your material. So you get that engagement, you get people who are personally involved because they've had that connection. They feel like they've influenced the atmosphere in the room. So even if you remember every word and you don't use it as a time-wasting exercise, you can also use it to bring people with you into the joke. People feel like they're more involved. Okay. The next one is when you're on a stage and you have lights, and I'm sure you felt this in your work, you're smaller than you appear, and your face is smaller, your facial expressions are smaller. So we studied this in our classes. Everything needs to be bigger. Your hands are bigger, your body language is bigger, even your mouth is larger, your eyes are larger. If you're a female or want to be one, go big with makeup, big with hair, because you need to compensate for the smallness that you actually appear when you're on the stage. And this can be any stage, including the wedding toast person. This is really helpful when you're acting scenes out, when you're trying on an accent, when you're running around doing funny things. So bigger than you think, okay? A callback is a technique that opens a loop and closes a loop. So let's say I would start my stand-up talking about my Porsche, okay? So I'm gonna park my Porsche, I drive my Porsche, and I park my Porsche right here, okay? And so you can't see the Porsche, I can see the Porsche, and I'm acting my Porsche out, it's here. Okay, so I'll forget about the Porsche is there, and then I'll come back maybe, 5 minutes later, and I'm walking around and say, oh, I can't run into my Porsche, right? That closes the loop. So that's called a callback, when you are referring to a specific moment at the beginning of your speech, and that makes the brain of your listeners kind of happy. We like it when a loop is opened and we see it close in a nice, neat little bow. One of the greatest speakers in the world, Simon Sinek, he has this fantastic habit of opening loops. The first maybe 2 or 3 minutes of his speeches, he'll just go opening a series of loops, just 1, 2, 3, and then he's forgetting about it and going off on some other tangent. You know, he has ADHD. Okay, well that's his problem. But it's actually very studied because every single loop that he opens, he closes sometime during the course of his lectures. And he won't ever miss one. So if you pay attention to this next time you hear him speak, or somebody else, you open a loop, you close a loop, that really makes it feel good. And in comedy, you would call this a callback. Okay. This is kind of a tricky one. It's very, very funny because it makes the room very uncomfortable. So you plant somebody in the audience to say something at a certain time that's going to make you appear funnier. And it puts everybody off balance. They think, oh God, this isn't supposed to happen. But then it sort of is, but it's very funny. So am I supposed to laugh? I don't know. And this elevating the tension in the room is a funny thing as it is, but it also unifies your audience. Your audience is part of the joke. Watching something happen in real time. We always enjoy seeing like a historical event. And it also gets the rest of the audience to think, oh, this is an energetic place. This is something that I can be part of as well. So if you have somebody to yell something out in the middle of your, that will make whatever you're saying funnier, or plant a question that's very good, then that's a really nice technique to use. You have to trust the person, that the person will not forget. And even if the person says it the wrong way, it has to be simple enough that it won't ruin things, because people do tend to forget.
Nice squash.
Huh? Right, see? But we didn't plan this in advance. So this is, by the way, a great technique to practice with. So if you are practicing a speech and you're doing it in front of a friend, make sure the friend is mean to you. So make sure the friend like throws things at you or does this, you know. Nothing is worse than this when you're practicing a speech when the other person is like, uh-huh, yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, okay. Then, you know, you can do anything. Okay. Misdirection is really fun. You're leading your audience to make them think that you're going somewhere with a story, but at the last minute you kind of pivot and talk about something else. So let's say you're at a party and you're toasting the groom or something who's about to get married, and you're talking about this beautiful woman, and everybody thinks, oh, he's talking about the bride, of course, but then that beautiful woman is his mother, or something like that, which is a natural mistake everybody can make. This is fun because you're bringing the emotions with you, and then everybody's surprised at the same time. So people are like, they're a little bit confused. They're not really sure what to make of it. They think, did I just hear that right? And so it also elevates people's engagement. They have to pay more attention. So this is a great technique if you can make this work. It takes a little bit of writing preparation and so on. Okay. Being vulnerable is really, really hard, but it also brings people with you. People laugh at two things. They laugh at funny things, but they also laugh at relatability. So you can tell a really funny story, but if you tell a funny story that shows that you're a human, that you're vulnerable, then people are feeling with you, not just laughing with you. So if you talk about, I have my son here with me in the audience. If I were to I should have you heckle. If I were to talk about, you know, my struggles as a mother and how sometimes I don't feel like I'm doing a good job, everybody can relate to that, you know, who has kids. And so that could be funny, but it also makes people feel with you, and that's what you want in the end. So be vulnerable, don't be afraid of that, people love it. And then these very small stories, very often when comics tell these stories, they're not talking about big events, they're not talking about nuclear arms race, or they're not talking about the elections, or they're not talking about, you know, my Porsche. They're talking about very tiny stories. That, you know, that time when I went to Starbucks and nobody could speak my name, and they asked me how to spell my name. And I said, well, how hard can it be? It's like, just spell it the way you want it. It doesn't matter. It's not a spelling test, just as long as I know what it is. Everybody's been to a Starbucks. And people who have unusual names all can relate to this. So you're bringing the people with you as you go. Very small stories, you know. And sometimes the smaller the story, then the better it is. Sometimes it lands more because we all have these little tiny experiences. And then memorizing it. Have people tried the memory palace? Do people know this technique? Okay. The memory palace is a great technique for memorizing things word for word, because a joke really needs to follow a very specific pattern. You can't just kind of talk your way around it like you can with a speech. A joke is very, very specific. It has to have that setup, and most of the time you get it right, but if you get the words wrong, it won't land in the right way. The memory palace technique is you take a thing that you know very, very well, like a place. So for me, it's my local Albert Heijn. I know that place like the back of my hand because I'm there at least once a day, because I'm feeding many teenagers and they need food, right? They need carbs. And so I need vegetables, they need carbs, my cat needs food. So I'm always going to this Albert Heijn. So you can wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I was like, you have vegetables? Yeah. And then the cat can food. So I know exactly where everything is. So you're walking in your mind, you're walking through a place that you know well, the Albert Heijn. I know that when I enter the Albert Heijn, that's when my first joke sets off. And I think I'm telling a joke about my Porsche. Okay, so I picture that Porsche right at the entrance to the Albert Heijn. I just have a picture of that. Okay, that's my first joke about the Porsche. And then as I'm walking into the Albert Heijn, which I know so well, I know that my second joke is going to be about a Sicilian pizza delivery guy, my favorite guy. Okay, and I will put him, let's call him Luigi. I will put Luigi where the cucumbers are, because I know exactly that the cucumbers are the next thing that I see in the Albert Heijn. I know it so well, right? So I walk in, I run into my Porsche, I know that joke, and then I'm going towards the cucumbers, I see Luigi right there. So I know I'm linking these two things. And because it's always an emotional experience going shopping, usually not a good emotion, I am linking the emotion which triggers my long-term memory. That's always helpful. So Porsche, Luigi by the cucumbers. I know that joke number 3 is going to be about my mother, because there's always something to laugh about with my mother. And I know that the next thing that I'm going to come across is I love mushrooms. Okay, so I see my mother holding mushrooms in her hands, and then I know, okay, so that's the mushroom. And it goes on and on and on like that. And you can memorize an entire speech linking all of these little, let's say, signposts of your speech with places that you know so well. And you know you walk, I mean, how many people go when they go to the Albert Heijn, they walk the same route, right? The same route. It's like, I know I can get the cat food and then come back for the khakis and do, but no, I mean, like a crazy person, I will walk the same route as if I'm a robot. And so use that to your advantage. You always walk the same route, let's say to your house, doesn't matter. Okay. All right, and then another thing that, this is not just for comedy, this is for any time you're giving a speech. The biggest rookie mistake is to kind of rush through it and to, fit as many words as you can in every single sentence and just pack it through. But practicing the art of silence at the right time is an incredibly powerful tool. And some of the best speakers use this, but it takes a lot of discipline. You have to kind of pull back and allow people to become a bit uncomfortable in the room. And then when you rush in with your joke, then you have them. So use this tool when you can. Know when to stop. 8 minutes is actually a really long time when you're on stage trying to make people laugh. But the same goes for speeches. The worst speeches are the ones that just go on forever and they just don't know how to stop. You're better off telling a shorter story than going on too long. So try to condense if you can. Okay, we are just going to do one quick little exercise. I've spoken long enough. And for this one, I don't know if we don't need to write things down, but let's go ahead and find your neighbor. So work in teams of 2. So let's see, everybody find one person. I swear it'll be painless. It will just take a minute. You won't feel a thing. So find one person to talk to and tell one funny story of something that happened this week. You don't have to write it, just think of one funny thing that happened this week. I'll go around and I'll help you out. One funny story. One funny story. You're telling one funny story to your neighbor. Oh, you want to tell me your story? Okay, have a seat. Your job is to tell a funny story. Actually, our pets are But I just heard 3 fantastic stories. I heard of one story of a lady who was receiving some very disturbing news about war and climate change, and her first instinct was, I need to go and get some food. I need to go to Albert Heijn. It's funny, it's hilarious, and that was great. Does anybody have a particular story to share? This is Toastmasters, so you need to jump up. So,
okay, I'll share.
There you go. Perfect. Yay.
Maybe the Dutch people in the room can help me. There's a Dutch saying that friends staying over in fish are only last 3 days long. Don't you know this story, the Dutch people? You shake your head, you know this saying? Vis en vrienden blijven 3 dagen.
Sorry, you need to do on your own.
Okay, so the Dutch, my husband said, the Dutch have a saying. Vrienden.
Vis en vlees blijft 3 dagen vers.
3 dagen vers.
3 dagen.
Yeah, precies. Die.
And he's not Dutch.
Yeah. No, but thank you.
I think that's the
so
Bible.
he knows this. He knows this. So my husband's best friend came to stay with us, and they know each other for like over 50 years. And he normally is no problem and everything. He moved to France. He's divorced. He had a brain tumor. His whole personality changed. And with this, and he's become hypersensitive on everything. Like, I do the dishes, Sonia, the pans. And then I'm like cooking and like everything. And then Frans, godverdomme, who can you get coffee serveren? Like the coffee's bad, the wine's bad, but like everything's bad. And they says, you know, I really enjoy staying with you. I have such, I have really like multi-million-dollar friends, and they have huge houses. I wonder why they're not asking me to stay over there. I go figure. Okay, that was
Good technique. Actually, I mean, this is a sad story that you've given it a humor twist. I mean, it's a relatability thing,
I
actually.
told you otherwise.
No, it's a relatable story. I mean, because the actual content, you weren't telling jokes there, right? You were using the other point of storytelling, which is the relatability. You made yourself vulnerable. Who hasn't been in that situation where you have your partner's friends, right? Your partner, your sister's got a whole room full of girls who are sleeping over, right? Like your little sister who's got like 15 girls over sleeping, and they're like, God, you can't wait for them to leave, and everything is driving you crazy. Well, we've all been there, right? Do we have one more volunteer? Okay, yes, sir. Step right up.
Uma. Hey, everybody. So, I have 2 parts of a dyslexia test. One is like, I have to have all these shapes. I was thinking there like, please make it stop. I was like, come on, man.
So you were in there for like, you were being
I was for like an hour, almost for an hour, and it was like, she sits there and it's like, I was like,
how many shapes? Like,
how many freaking shapes, man? And I was like,
What shape?
dodecahedron.
no, and then it was like, but also the other one, I was writing stuff on the second half. I was writing. I was like, is this the way to write some words? And then she kept on smiling.
She was writing
So like,
obviously showing signs of dyslexia.
and then she was like putting the score stuff on a piece of paper, and then she's like, yeah, 3 more to go. I was like, damn it.
That's great. Now, there was a technique that you used here. I don't know if you realize that you're using it. Can anybody name one of the 10 that he used really well in this?
Silence.
Silence. Brilliant. Very well done. He allowed the silence to be the punch line. That was the punch. Because it wasn't that you asked, how many shapes are there? 5. It's how many shapes are there? And you allowed that uncomfortable silence to fill the room. Very nice. Okay, so let's just kind of, what were all those things again? Because there were a ton of things. This is just like a recap. You want to engage your audience. It's a nice way to pass the time if you forget what you're supposed to say, and it doubles as a way of engaging them. So you talk, and also it's important to know, whatever you ask, bless you, whatever you ask of your audience, whatever answer they give has to move the joke forward. So if you are asking for something like, what do you do for a living? And the guy has to say plumber, and if he doesn't say plumber, then the whole joke fails. No, that's a fail. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that whatever it is that you do for a living, whether you're a plumber or an Uber driver or a CEO, that it all works, because then you're not going to be sidelined by some bad engagement. So engage the audience, but make sure that everything you ask them powers it forward. You're going big. This is also something our previous speaker did very, very well. Lots of hands, lots of full body movement. I saw him go down a little bit. Our first speaker also used some nice big hand gestures. We all felt like she was frying the fish, she was flipping the toast in the pan, she was scrubbing it, and oh, she was making too much noise. So there's a lot of body movement there. So that was another thing that she did very, very well. Opening and closing a loop, right? So if we were to open and close a loop about, let's say, about the frying pans, let's say, that you were, at the end of your 2 days, you were trying to get the guy to leave, so you just accidentally drop a frying pan. That frying pan that you used in the beginning, you repeat back to it, it closes a loop in the person's mind. Misdirection is the art of leading somebody somewhere, and then it turns out it's about something else. So an example of misdirection in the story of the dyslexia testing, which was an endless, from the waiting room perspective, it was a very long 2 hours. It could be funny if your goal was to have a high score. You wanted to have dyslexia so you could get a little extra time in your exam. So everybody assumes that this is something that you're trying to, put your best face forward. But then if you reveal at the end of your talk that you're actually going for the lowest possible score so you could get a higher grade at school, then that's misdirecting us, right? We're not so sure what to think. We saw some great vulnerability from our first speaker, because there were a lot of very uncomfortable emotions. You have your this guy was obviously an untouchable. You couldn't make fun of him because of the brain tumor and because of the personality. I mean, this is a guy that you can't touch him, right? But we've all been there, right? We've all felt what you felt. So you made us really react to you and your vulnerability. You were showing maybe not the nicest part of yourself, and that made us all like you more, because we all know this. We've all been there, and that was beautiful. Memorizing it. Both of our speakers came up cold, which is hard and great, but usually you come up with your stuff memorized, very much so. Weaving in the silence. A mood switch is something we didn't really talk about, but it's a nice way of kind of slowing down and speeding up the pace. So some of the great storytellers, if they are telling a long story of like 30 minutes or something like this, there'll be times when the story is really fast, a lot of high action, big words, tight dialogue, and there are times when you have to slow it down. And then you will speed it up again. Who does this really well? Obama. Listen to some of his speeches. He will slow you down, speed you up, and you're like an accordion, and he just manipulates your emotions beautifully, takes you with him. All right. So think back to what is your job. What are you here to do? To inform, to engage, to inspire, to connect, to get the people in your room to think together with you, to be emotionally involved in what you're talking about. You're basically there to build bridges between you and the audience that you're speaking to. Thank you.